that will appreciate when this happens, offsetting the decline and allowing investors to earn a return. Similar to what they would see if they were investing as Americans. Other risks an investor might look to hedge include interest rate risk, equity risk, commodity risk, inflation risk, and more. But while some of these can be offset using specific
What is an arbitrage? Arbitrage is the process of simultaneously buying and selling an asset to profit from the differences in the price of the asset. Let's take a look at how arbitrage works in a simplified example. Imagine we are living in City A. City A has two markets, Market A and B. In Market A, the shops are selling berries at $30 per kilogram. And just down the street in Market B, the shops are selling berries at $40 per kilogram. However, most people buying berries in Market B don't know that they could buy berries at a much cheaper price at Market A. And if they knew, they will probably walk to Market A to buy the cheaper berries. The difference in prices is because of imperfect information. As a smart businessman, you decide to take advantage of this. So, every morning, you go to Market A to buy the berries at a cheaper price, and go to Market B to sell the berries at a higher price. For every kilogram of berries you sell, you earn a risk-free profit of $10 from the price difference in the markets. In fact, in the next few months, you became so successful that you start buying large quantities of berries in Market A and selling them in Market B. This affects the demand and supply of berries in Market A and B, respectively. The demand of berries in Market A increases, so their price increases in Market A. And the supply of berries in Market B increase, so their price decreases in Market B. Eventually, the price of the berries in the two markets will become so close together that you can't make a profit from their price differences. Something similar happens in the financial marketplace as well. A company stock could be trading on the New York Stock Exchange for $1 per share and trading on the London Stock Exchange for $1.05 per share. An arbitrageur could pocket the difference of 5 cents per share by buying the stock for $1 on the New York Stock Exchange and selling it on the London Stock Exchange. Such arbitrage opportunities arise usually because of imperfect information. Arbitrage is often called riskless profit because it's theoretically a riskless activity. Traders are buying and selling the same asset simultaneously and pocketing the price difference as profit. However, the modern technology has significantly reduced arbitrage opportunities. The advancement of technology has led to the advent of automated trading systems programmed to monitor fluctuations or price differences in similar financial instruments. These systems are able to detect and act on the inefficient pricing setups so rapidly that the price difference of similar financial instruments and arbitrage opportunity is quickly eliminated. There is also
Almost everyone knows this thing here, a Big Mac. But what's a burger got to do with the economy? Well, ever heard of the Big Mac Index? It's based on something called purchasing power parity theory. That means that in an equal market, the same product would cost the same everywhere. But because the market isn't equal, with each country's and currency's different purchasing power, we need comparative figures to show these differences. And in this case, a Big Mac is particularly useful because it's sold in around 140 countries, and of course everywhere it's made the same way. Here's an example. In the USA, a Big Mac costs $5. That's the benchmark. In Poland, the same burger costs about 10 zloty, which converts to around $2.50. So a Big Mac in Poland is only half the price. This means that Poland's purchasing power is only half as high as the USA's. But a Big Mac is only a very rough indicator of a currency's value. It disregards too many different factors that affect the price. Besides, in some countries, Big Macs aren't even sold. So commenting on the purchasing power of those countries using this index would be impossible. Some countries, big rough indicator of a currency's value. $2.50. Everywhere it's made the same way. Here's an example. In the USA, a Big Mac costs $5. That's the benchmark. In Poland, the same burger costs about 10 zloty, which converts to around $2.50. So a Big Mac in Poland is only half the price. This means that Poland's purchasing power is only half as high as the USA's. But a Big Mac is only a very rough indicator of a currency's value. It disregards too many different factors that affect the price. Besides, in some countries, Big Macs aren't even sold. So commenting on the purchasing power of those countries using this index would be impossible. That's why the Mini Mac Index came about in 2013. It uses the price of an iPad mini as a comparative indicator. This product is sold all around the world, so it's often seen as a more reliable benchmark. And then there's also the Billy Index, which uses a shelving unit sold by a large Swedish
Purchasing Power Parity, PPP, compares different countries' currencies through a market basket of goods approach. Two currencies are in PPP when a market basket of goods, taking into account the exchange rate, is priced the same in both countries. PPP currency rates are considered more accurate than market exchange rates. Market exchange rates, set on the foreign exchange market, tend to be influenced by other factors, such as government intervention, different interest rates, speculation trading, and hedging. PPP rates are determined by comparing the prices of identical items in different countries. PPP rates are often difficult to determine because of differences in purchasing habits among the citizens of different countries, unequal quality of goods in those countries, and differences in each country's economy. But once the PPP rate is determined, it remains relatively constant over the long run. PPP is often used to make more accurate comparisons between two countries' gross domestic product, GDP, than can be made when using market exchange rates. For example, let's look at two rival countries, Frionia and Controlia. Each country produces the same amount of goods in a given year, thus the GDP should be the same for each country. But because Controlia manipulates its currency on the world market, its currency is artificially high when compared to Frionia's currency. It takes 3 Frionia dollars to buy 1 Controlia pound. So using the market exchange rate to compare GDPs, it would look as if Controlia's GDP were 3 times the size of Frionia's when expressed in the same currency. Using the PPP exchange rate would eliminate this bias and show that the GDP for each country is the same.
What is the Fisher effect? The Fisher effect describes the relationship between the inflation rate and the nominal interest rate. Suppose your grandma lends you $100 at an interest rate of 10%. That's right, this grandma has an interest rate. But suppose also that over the year, the inflation rate is 10%. So at the end of the year, you pay your grandma back $110. That looks pretty good on paper, but during that year, money has become less valuable. Due to inflation, what used to cost $100 now costs $110. So what's your grandma's real return? 0. More generally, we can write that the real interest rate is equal to the nominal rate, the rate charged on paper, minus the inflation rate. Inflation reduces the real return on a loan. So, if grandma expected the inflation rate to be 10%, then in order to get a real return of 5%, she must charge you a nominal interest rate of 15%. Now, you may think grandma's cold for charging you a 15% interest rate, but she isn't alone in this behavior. Everyone does it, and it's called the Fisher effect, named after the great American economist Irving Fisher. The Fisher effect observes that nominal interest rates will rise with expected inflation rates. We can see the Fisher effect in this data from the United States. Notice, for example, how interest rates and inflation rates were low in the 1960s, but as inflation increased, so did interest rates. Interest rates reached a peak of almost 20% when inflation hit 15% per year. Since that time, inflation has fallen, and so have interest rates. So to recap, the Fisher effect describes how interest rates and expected inflation rates move in tandem. To learn more about what causes inflation.
In this video, I want to discuss the international Fisher effect. Now, you may be familiar with the Fisher effect, which is attributed to the famed economist Irving Fisher, which suggests that nominal interest rates contain two components, the expected inflation rate and the real interest rate. And you should recall that the real interest rate, or the real rate of interest, represents the return on the investment to savers after accounting for expected inflation. And the formula is the nominal rate equals 1 plus the real rate times 1 plus expected inflation. And a lot of times we approximate this by the real rate plus expected inflation. Now, I've done a video on the Fisher effect where I show why you can use this approximation and why it's a good approximation, and I'll post a link below this video. Now, in order to get to the international Fisher effect, we need to discuss briefly the concept of purchasing power parity. I also have a video on purchasing power parity, and I will post a link below this video as well. There are two versions of purchasing power parity. Absolute purchasing power parity says that the prices of baskets of goods in two different countries should be the same. Relative purchasing power parity says the rate of change in prices should be similar when measured in the common currency. So the equation for relative purchasing power parity is that the expected change in the exchange rate, E of F, equals 1 plus the inflation rate in the home country divided by 1 plus the inflation rate in the foreign country minus 1. So just to sort of recap a little bit, the Fisher effect shows that for a given real rate, the higher the expected inflation rate, the higher the nominal rate, purchasing power parity tells us that exchange rates will change based on differentials in inflation rates in two countries. So putting these two together, we get the international Fisher effect. And this basically says that countries with higher nominal rates have higher inflation rates due to the Fisher effect. So using relative purchasing power parity, where the change in the exchange rate should be related to the differences in inflation rates of two countries, we get the change in the exchange rate should be related to differences in the nominal rates of the two countries. So the equation for this is the expected change in the exchange rate is 1 plus the interest rate in the home country divided by 1 plus the interest rate in the foreign country. Or it can be approximated by the interest rate in the home country minus the interest rate in the foreign country. So this looks exactly like relative purchasing power parity, we've just substituted the nominal interest rate for the inflation rates. All right, let's take a look at an example. Suppose the interest rate on a one-year insured U.S. bank deposit is 9%, and the rate on a one-year insured British bank deposit is 10%. And the reason we say insured is you want to make sure that they have the same level of risk, so essentially risk.
When a company does business internationally and buys or sells goods in a different country, it will either pay for purchases in the foreign currency or earn income from sales in the foreign currency. Exchange rate risk becomes a factor in these interactions because the value of the foreign currency could change between the time of the transaction and the time the payment is made or received and converted to the company's home currency. A lag of 30 to 90 days in accounts payable is fairly common, so global companies often have at least a 30-day window when fluctuations in exchange rates could result in paying or earning more or less than they planned on. Global firms seek to reduce or even eliminate this exchange rate risk by adopting one of three common strategies: spot rate exchanges, a hedge, or a currency swap. Let's take a look at each one of these strategies. Spot rate exchanges allow a firm to buy the needed foreign currency at the so-called spot rate at the time of the transaction. This eliminates the time gap between agreeing on a price and making the payment. For instance, if Hyundai Motors of Korea were to agree to buy rubber from Salim Ivomas Pratima, an Indonesian rubber company, Hyundai could simultaneously sign the contract and buy Indonesian rupiah to pay Salim even if the payment were not due for a few weeks. This way, Hyundai would remove the risk of the rupiah gaining value relative to the South Korean won in the intervening period. The next strategy used in managing foreign exchange risk is a hedge. Hyundai could hedge its foreign exchange risk by agreeing with a bank to buy an option that would allow it to purchase a set amount of rupiah at a set price in 30, 60, or 90 days. Agreeing to the price for the rupiah ahead of time allows Hyundai to transfer any exchange risk to the bank. This type of transaction is also called a forward contract. In essence, it takes the future exchange rate and shifts the risk to the bank for a fee. Another type of hedge called an option contract buy an option that would allow it to purchase a set amount of rupiah at a set price in 30, 60, or 90 days. Agreeing to the price for the rupiah ahead of time allows Hyundai to transfer any exchange risk to the bank. This type of transaction is also called a forward contract. In essence, it takes the future exchange rate and shifts the risk to the bank for a fee. Another type of hedge called an option contract lets Hyundai purchase rupiah at an agreed-upon rate in the future. But Hyundai is not required to buy the foreign currency if the previous agreed-upon rate is worse than the rate the company can get on an open market. For instance, if the rupiah becomes less expensive in the period, Hyundai can use the current spot rate to purchase rupiah when its payment is due and pocket the difference. Hyundai pays the bank for the option whether it exercises it or not, but buying the option removes the company's downside risk. The third strategy global firms use to manage foreign exchange risk is a currency swap. With a currency swap, two global firms borrow money in their local currency and then swap the principal with the other party. For instance, if a British company needs Brazilian real and a Brazilian company needs a similar amount of British pounds, the British company could borrow pounds while the Brazilian company borrows real. Then the companies swap their currencies, giving each company the foreign currency it needs, but allowing each company to pay back the loan in its local currency. Eliminating exchange rate risk. Giving each company the foreign currency it needs, but allowing each company to pay back the loan in its local currency. Eliminating pound. British company needs Brazilian real, and a Brazilian company needs a similar amount of British pounds, the British company could borrow pounds while the Brazilian company borrows real. Then the companies swap their currencies, giving each company the foreign currency it needs, but allowing each company to pay back the loan in its local currency, eliminating exchange rate risk. These three These strategies help mitigate the risk of being a British in a side risk swap. With a currency swap, two global firms borrow money in their local currency and then swap the principal with the other party. For instance, if a British company needs Brazilian real and a Brazilian company needs a similar amount of British pounds, the British company could borrow pounds while the Brazilian company borrows real. Then the companies swap their currencies, giving each company the foreign currency it needs, but allowing each company to pay back the loan in its local currency, eliminating exchange rate risk. These three strategies help mitigate the risk of doing business internationally with foreign currency.